Welcome to the NGI Pointer webinar. We're using these webinars to talk a little bit more about our second open call, give you some examples from the first open call, and tell you that we're really quite strict about the scope and the minimum sort of quality criteria that we're talking about a little bit later on for our projects, because we usually get quite a high volume of projects in, and this seems to be the trend again. Having talked to Claire yesterday about what's coming in so far. So the first thing is I would like to give you a little bit of context about NGI. So the Next Generation Internet is a program that's funded by the European Commission. And the idea is that we are working with various layers, various components, and various dimensions on the internet as the substrate for new ways of doing applications and services, but also in itself renovating parts of the web and the internet with new approaches. So we have quite a number of projects. I think it's now 11 projects that are funding through these financial support to third-party mechanisms, a variety of projects. Some are more oriented towards a startup on entrepreneurship culture, and some, like NGI Pointer, are more towards an activist, but also SME or university context projects. And they all have a slightly different flavor. So we have things that are looking at data portability. We have things that are looking at trust and privacy. We have things that are looking at search and discovery. So there's a wide variety of different types of topics that can be addressed in NGI. And in NGI Pointer, so now making the switch over to this side, we are focusing very much on internet architecture renovation. And what I mean with that, I'll get to when I present the project in a little bit more detail. If you have questions, by the way, you're always welcome to use the chat and put that in there. And I hope I'll spot that straight away and answer it if it's in a good context. Otherwise, we'll take them at the end of the presentation. So I'll take now this part here, talk about NGI Pointer as a project and what we're looking for, and then Claire will take over and give you a little bit more context about how to apply for funding. And then we take questions and talk to you about your ideas or concerns or things that are unclear. So NGI Pointer is a project with 4 partners. So it's Aarhus University, that's myself, Mirko Presser, and Camilla is also from Aarhus University. Then we have Funding Box, Claire is on the call, and then we have 2 more organizations, one called Linknovate and the other one Digital Works. And our roles in the project are that Funding Box really looks after the open calls and the mechanisms interacting with the projects that we're funding on a more formal and administrative side of things. Whereas Aarhus University, so myself and my name partner, Mirko Ross from Digital Works, we're looking after the content of the project. So we're looking after that when you deliver your projects, we're signing off certain milestones so that then Funding Box can go around and pay you the tranches for this money. And Linknovate specifically, their role is really to know what's going out around us. So they have some very interesting mechanisms towards scouting for people, towards looking, for instance, for jury members, but also trying to look for people that could be interesting to apply for this call, and generally helping us for topics and ideas. And so the 4 of us, we make up this consortium. I think we're nicely balanced, and we've already gone through the first round of our open calls. So we called for a first round of internet architects or internet architecture renovation. We have a total of 5.6 million euros, of which we spent around about 3 million euros in our first open call. And we're very, very much looking for third-party projects that are renovating internet architecture, develop new web components, or look at existing web components, as well as tools and methods around this. So it's quite a vague sort of phrasing that we have there. So we have maybe some more pointers on the right-hand side, no pun intended on this one. that maybe gives you some ideas of what type of projects we might be looking for. And this is also, again, very broad and very wide. So these are more sort of challenges. We wrapped it into a document called the work program, and you can find that all on the website. And I'll go into some more of those a little bit later. But we are looking for blue sky bottom-up projects. So it's your idea that counts, not a challenge that we're throwing out and you're trying to solve this. So it's something that you're probably already working on in an open source project, or that has been sitting on your desk for a while, but you have not found the time or the money to do this. So this should be a project that gives you the opportunity to do that. So like I said, we had the first open call already completed, and the second open call launched on the 1st of February, and now will close in something like, 15 days. So just a little bit over 2 weeks, or in 2 weeks, on the 1st of April. And you can find more information on our website here. And also, if you just cut out the NGI, the pointer and just go to ngi.eu, you can also find more about the whole program, of course. There have been a few things on the chat. Oh, Jean-Luc is here. Jean-Luc, do you want to just jump in? And I gave a little bit of context already. Would you like to just say a few words as well about NGI, just to give a bit of context from the European Commission's perspective?
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Mirko. Sorry, I had some difficulty joining, but well, I think last time I mentioned Van Jacobson and the evolution of TCP, but I can reuse this also for this session, because really what the Commission wants in this project, NGI Pointer, and with the associated third parties, is really to challenge the architecture of the internet and propose ways to improve it. And there are really two methods. One is to go through incremental changes. And this is where, for instance, the flow control options of Van Jacobson help in the 90s. But the other one is a more revolutionary or blue sky that can be that can bring radical changes. Of course, when it comes to radical changes, we have to be careful of not creating fragmentation and propose a path for adoption. But that's, for instance, an example is the named data networks, NDN, which is also supported by Van Jacobson, now is at UCLA. And this is typically an architecture where you give a unique identifier to content, and your network is oriented towards routing according to objects as opposed to interfaces. So clearly there are paths. In terms of priority, Mirko will mention that. One thing I'd like to stress is the green aspects. So it's become clearer and clearer that ICT is a major consumer of electricity, and the architecture has to evolve towards frugality in terms of electricity consumption. So all solutions that can help there, all solutions that can better use the cycles electricity is something that we should pursue in NGI Pointer. There is a clear mandate for that in there. Well, and just one last word, you are part of NGI Pointer is part of a bigger family of projects which interact with each other. We have now, as I was mentioned, 11 such similar projects in a very wide range of topics. And we have also support action that help third parties in terms of notably visibility, dissemination, as well as exploitation of results. With that, I leave the floor back to Mirko and the rest of the consortium for this webinar. Thank you. I'll be available at the end for questions if need be.
Thank you very much, Jean-Luc. Yeah, so I would like to just pick up on this. So energy efficiency is actually highlighted here. And It's one of the areas that we didn't get any contributions from in the first open call. So we give it a slightly higher priority than other proposals that are coming in. Slightly higher means that it's only at the edge. So we have around about 2.5 million euros left. This is our final open call. We don't have any other open calls coming in, at least not planned. This means that if the bottom line in the last two projects, if there's a tie, the energy efficiency one will get a advantage. That's the only thing that we have put into place. So there's no general prioritization based on energy efficiency. It's only that last switch. But we do encourage energy efficiency projects a little bit more. So we targeted a little bit more some of the communities around there. And we also invited a new advisory board member that is specifically looking at energy efficiency into our project. So there is a bit more of a priority, but it's not going to give you an advantage on the evaluation, except for that last project, if there's a time. So there's a few more of these points here. And I think Jean-Luc mentioned a little bit around this, but we are very broad. We would like to see different topics being addressed, and I'll get into this a little bit more as we go along now. So first of all, there was a question by David, who can apply, and we're looking for NGI architects. I think what is immensely important to us is the person. So who's the person that is applying, or who are the people that are applying? Even if you are working for a larger organization, or you're part of a research team, or part of a larger group of people that are working together on an open source project, we really want to know who you are. So there's no limitation to the organization or the natural person that is applying, except for that it needs to be European-based researchers, and Claire will be more specific on what that means exactly in the next presentation. But we really want to know about you, who you are when you're applying for the project. So what are we looking for? The scope is, so these are criteria under which you will be evaluated, but I think it's not, we can't strip this out when we say what we're looking for, of course. And Claire again will pick that up a little bit later again, but we will look at scope and minimum quality criteria to pass projects on to the next stage. So it's immensely important that you fulfill the scope. So the scope is internet architecture, web components, tools and methods. And this is not, we don't want to see large scale projects that renovate or suggest revolutionary methods, or looking at large platform components, or looking at the platform in itself, or applications that are sitting on top of the internet. Of course, you know, the web, strictly speaking, as well as email or browser, these are all applications that are sitting there, but we call them core applications, and we still think that this is part of the internet architecture or web components that we're looking at. When you do work on a larger project, so we have projects, for instance, funded like Scion or Solid, then these are very specific elements that we are funding, a specific tool or method that they're working with, or a specific protocol that they're improving. And it's very, very well described how this fits into a larger scope. The slides will be made available as well afterwards, alongside also with the video of this. We also have minimum quality criteria. This is more about you and your project. So we want to see experience in certain areas. So experience contributed to open source. So it needs to be a contribution that you or your team have made. And ideally, this is a live open source project. So something that has interactions where also other people are contributing or using your open source code. So giving evidence of this is definitely something that we strongly value. As well as contribution to the internet architecture community. So this could be something very formal, like for instance, a contribution to IETF or some other standardization body like W3C for web, or other mechanisms around that. But there needs to be clear evidence that this has been made with an effort, not just sending off an email or contributing to one meeting, but being present and contributing to the community in a meaningful way. And the final minimum quality criteria is that we publish in the field. So these are peer-reviewed publications in the field of internet architecture. So usually this should very strongly relate to the topic that you're working with or that you're proposing in your project. And we're looking for peer-reviewed. So, these are scientific publications that are that have a certain credibility level from the publication side. On the impact, so this is 1 out of 3 is a minimum. On the impact, there's 2 out of 3. And we're looking for demonstrable internet architecture renovation. So what this means is that we are preferring workable code. So something that is operational, that is, you can execute the code, it runs somewhere, you can demonstrate it in some form or another. So we're not looking at PowerPoint or paperwork. We have funded some projects that are more tool-based or more mechanism rather than, specific code or protocol contributions. That's fewer of them are, or there's actually only one that I would class as a tool that has been funded like that. We also look at open source contributions. So this is, even if you're working on a platform context, the contribution that you make into that platform, such as, for instance, Solid, or there's several sort of peer-to-peer communication protocol platforms that are running there. They are working with an uptake of a specific protocol. So we have, for instance, email clients that work with JMAP, or we have communication protocols that looking at IPFS and things like this. So we're really looking at that specific contribution. And then the final one is standardization and rollout potential. So if you're, for instance, starting up some conversations in ITF, or if you're starting up a larger rollout with a partnership with another group of people, like, there's something going on with the Mozilla Foundation, for instance, or some other organizations, then this is something that we also, of course, value highly. So this is the uptake, the ability to bring your work into a wider community that we also, of course, value. We don't necessarily need to see that come to an end. We would like to help you get started on this one. And that would be sufficient for us to see this as an impact that you're generating as part of the project. We know that these processes can take much longer than 1 year, which we're offering in this project. So I think it's probably best to look at examples from the first open call, because we're really quite happy what we got in the first open call. We had a total of 159 projects that were eligible when they came in. We excluded roughly half of those based on scope and minimum quality criteria. The quality was generally very high, but the half that we excluded didn't meet our criteria as we saw. We will be very strict on these criteria of scope and minimum quality. So if we don't see that the publication fits or isn't in a good enough journal, or that the open source contribution is dead, there's no activity there, or for instance, that the contribution is too lightweight into the community, into the architecture community, then we will exclude it. Also, if the scope is too broad, so if it's addressing a wider project and it's not specified what specific contribution you're making, we will also exclude it in the scope. So these are examples that we will be doing. So on the first open call, you can find on the URL the various projects that we are funding. And we also started up a podcast where we now have the Solid project via Digita as a podcast, and Cyan will be available soon. And we've also talked to our colleagues at Scuttlebutt. So these are more sort of platform oriented, but specific components to those platforms that we're talking about in those podcasts. But we have these, let's say, what is it now, 8 different topics that we categorize this project into. So we have some core internet applications. So we have, for instance, Lightmeter and Nuxt, as well as letters. Can't find that right now. Here we go. They are sort of what we call core internet applications. So Nuxt is more like a browser, Lightmeter and letters addressing email clients or mechanisms around that. So we do fund those, but they're very much what we sort of call this core internet applications. We work with identity, virtualization, security mechanisms, tools, and so on. But really, the majority of our projects, so 7, maybe 8 of those projects address layer 2 and 3 transport and network. And there we have projects such as, for instance, multipath TCP. We have a couple of projects. We have a project addressing congestion control as an example, and other topics that are looking at these 2 layers. We also have privacy by design communication protocols. A lot of them focus on IPFS, but also other mechanisms, peer-to-peer mainly. So you have, for instance, Scuttlebutt, you have PeerGOS, which you could also see as maybe an application or several applications, and so on. So there's a number of those. And then we have what we call new ideas and paradigms. So this is maybe where we breaking from a traditional DNet architecture and looking at some new ways of looking at. So you have, for instance, Scion is an example of this, which is a project that has been in existence for now more than 11 years with 60 plus contributors globally to this project. It's already in operation. ISPs are supporting it. But the specific contribution that they're making in there is code verification on the routers, on the router code. So this is one very specific narrow contribution that is worked on in the project specifically. So here you have a little bit more of an overview. Maybe I'll highlight a few more. So we have Carusa as an example as well. We put this under privacy by design communication protocols, but in essence, it's a software, hardware, open source project of wireless optical communication systems for urban environments. You have several projects like, for instance, Reowolf and Verified Scion. They're partially run by universities in conjunction with, in case of Scion, with a private company. You have projects such as, for instance, let's pick some congestion experience. These are 2 individuals working together very closely. You have multipath TCP, one project which is one single person, and then another project that is based on an organization. And it turns out that they actually knew each other quite well and didn't know that they both were applying for it. And you have, as an example, also a tool which is a Linux regression tracking tool. That's also being developed as part of the project. So these should give you some examples of what we're funding. We're very happy with the set that we have here, but of course, we're missing some sort of areas that we're trying to cover in NGI Pointer, like Jean-Luc explained earlier on. But one of the areas that we think we would like to see more of is this energy efficiency or greening the internet. And I'll talk to you about that in just a short while, a little bit more. So what do you get? You get up to 200,000 euros in bottom-up Blue Sky project funding. And Claire will talk to you about that a little bit more. And then up to 12 months, a bespoke mentoring program. So we discuss a few milestones so that we have a payment schedule that we're creating for you, but everything else is a conversation. We're trying to figure out how we can best support your project in NGI Pointer. So we're looking at this individual mentoring plan that we then create where you maybe need something from us, but as a minimum, we will have sort of 3-4 checkpoints, probably 4 checkpoints with you, where we are looking at the progress of your projects. So some ideas you will find in the work program. I've already talked about those. I'm just going to highlight 2, but I think we already had the highlight from Jean-Luc about TCP/IP. Maybe from my side, I'll just give a little bit more on the energy efficiency side. So here, this is again a very broad set of ideas that you can approach. So one of them would be, for instance, how to measure energy consumption of certain ICT mechanisms. This is something that's, I think, probably under developed. You can also look at making the protocols themselves more efficient, or making mechanisms of how to store, retrieve, or work with data and communications overall more energy efficient. So there's many different approaches on how you can interpret energy efficiency. And there's no specific solution that we're looking for. It's really something that you should be already working on and contributing. So with this, just a reminder of the deadline. So it's 1st of April, and of course you can see here Lego Man because Aarhus University is in Denmark, so we have to have some Lego in the presentation. And you're probably wondering why this is an Imperial Trooper. I mean, we're using Zoom today, so it's not always in the right spirit of doing things. We probably should be using something like Big Blue Button or things like that. But as a university, you always have to work on both sides. But you know, this is Finn, so he's one of the good guys. So you can always get in touch with us via ngpointer@fundingbox.com to ask questions. You can also find that on our website, and there's also a Twitter handle. And I think I would like to hand over straight away to Claire.
Perfect. Thank you, Mirko. Yep. I should be able to share my screen. Yep. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, good. Right, so thank you for the introduction, Mirko. I'm Claire from Funding Box, and we're largely responsible for the management of the open calls, as Mirko mentioned earlier. And I'll be taking you through the application process. We keep highlighting the deadline, but obviously it's pretty critical that you submit on time, otherwise we will not be able to evaluate your application. And what you see here in this image is the landing page of the open call. And I assume most of you may have already come across it. So this should be fairly familiar to you. As you can see, there's a button called Apply Now, which will get you started in the process. But before I get into that, I'd like to highlight some very basic rules. We have created a few documents for you, which are crucial in ensuring your success. So you definitely need to take a look at the guide for applicants, which includes all the information that Mirko has already elaborated on. So the scope, the minimum quality criteria, the application form, sections, timelines, and of course there is information about the work program and the support program you'll be enrolled in if you're successful. So do make sure that you read that guide and you understand it very well. And of course, if you have any doubts, we do have ways for you to contact us, and I'll touch upon that later at the end of this presentation. On top of that, we also have a frequently asked questions document, which is a living document. We update it regularly with your most common questions. So this one pretty much supplements the guide for applicants and highlights the main sort of questions you may have on how to apply and how you will be evaluated. And last but not least, we also have provided to you the sub-grant agreement template, which is the legal document that is signed between yourselves, if you're selected for the program, and the consortium. So I would advise that you take a look at this document in advance so that you can familiarize yourselves with the terms of the contract. And all of these documents can be found on the landing page of the open call. So I'll quickly run through the application process, which, as I mentioned, you should already be familiar with if you've begun your application. As I mentioned, you'll need to click Apply Now, as you've seen in the previous image, and you'll be taken to a new page called Start a New Application. And once you do that, you'll see a list of sections. All of this has to be submitted online. It's critical that nothing is sent to us over email. It will not be evaluated. So make sure you fill out all the sections on time, online, and submit before the deadline, because sometimes you run into issues with connectivity, especially since most of us are working from home and we may not have the best connections. If you want, you can also add a contributor to help out with the filling out the sections, as you can see from the button on the top left corner in the image. And you can continue to edit even after you've completed the sections and submitted. So it doesn't matter if you've already submitted, just keep editing if you need to, so long as it happens before the deadline. And just to elaborate a little bit on the sections, as you can see, they're pretty straightforward or standard sections that, if you're familiar with Horizon 2020, you should have seen before. We ask for some basic information and some legal information, which is necessary for us to evaluate your project. Then we also ask for some basic information about your project and what it stands for. As Mirko mentioned, we also evaluate your experience in certain areas, and this is part of the minimum quality criteria. And then we move on to 3 standard sections: excellence, impact, and implementation, where you'll need to talk about the excellence of your project, how innovative it is, how it will be changing the status quo, the impact of your project, how it will change the way things work, and the implementation, which is how your team has the capabilities and capacity to run the project. And of course, here you also talk about resources. As Mirko mentioned, you're able to request up to 200K if you are an organization, and you can also request 50K per person, but if you are a team of natural persons, you can also reach 200K as the maximum, okay, with 50K each. And then we do have some other sections in the application form that require you to commit to some statements, such as conflict of interest, and we provide information on the processing of personal data as well. One other thing I'd like to highlight, we do give you the opportunity to provide a supporting document, but remember that the supporting document is not the main application document. We do allow for 10 pages, which means you do have the room to expand on what you would have already stated in the application form, but do not treat it as the document which will be evaluated by the evaluators. So make sure that the key information is in the application form, and then you'll use the supporting document to support your statements in the application form. And these will both be reviewed by the evaluators, but you will be scored on the key information in the application form. Briefly, I want to take you through the evaluation process. Once you've submitted your application by the deadline, we do have a minimum eligibility check. Again, as I mentioned, this is all in the guide for applicants, so do take a look. The minimum eligibility check ensures that you are coming from an eligible country, such as member states, associated countries, the UK. You'll also need to submit your application form in English, on time, by the deadline, and online. So these are some things that we check. And if you don't pass that check, unfortunately, you will not be able to proceed to the next step. And then, as Mirko mentioned, we have the minimum quality criteria check, which focuses on your experience. And here we have the technical partners in the project, Digital Works and Arhos, checking to see whether your experience is what the project requires, as well as the scope. The scope is critical as well. You need to make sure you are addressing the scope outlined in the guide for applicants. If you're successful in this stage, you will proceed to the next stage, which is the expert evaluation. And here we involve 2 independent experts. So they're outside of the consortium, outside of the project, and they will evaluate your application. And of course, we will notify you whether or not you would have passed. If you are above thresholds, we will evaluate your ranking, and then we will select the final list based on budget at the consensus meeting, which is where the evaluation committee meet up to discuss the successfully evaluated projects. Of course, if you've made it, you will be signing the sub-grant agreement, which is a document I mentioned earlier, the legal document signed between yourselves and the consortium. And then once that's done, we'll invite you to the welcome event, which is when we'll kick off the support program. So just to wrap up, as I mentioned, it's a very straightforward process. You need to log in online, you click apply, you start a new application, you fill it out and you submit. So make sure to submit your application. There'll be a button that will appear once you've filled out all the compulsory sections. We expect it to take about 1 to a day and a half for you to fill out. And of course, if you have a contributor helping out, that may take less time than that. And you can also export your application from as a PDF or delete it if you feel it no longer applies to the NGI pointer project, or if you've created a new one accidentally. So just remember that we'll only be accepting one application. So that's it from my end. As I mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We have a help desk, which is ngipointer@fundingbox.com. And we also have a community space, which is spaces.fundingbox.com for the NGI pointer community, as well as the wider NGI community. So there you'll be able to ask your questions or even learn about new events and webinars such as these. And it also has a chat function, so you'll be able to chat with other members of the community as well. So I guess now we can begin to take questions, Mirko.
I need to unmute myself. So, and I was in the meantime given a very interesting bowl of tomato soup by my son, who has Mehlkunstgelb. What would that be in English? Economics and home things. I don't know, from school. So it's very delicious, actually. So I've answered 2 questions in the meantime. So one was about open source projects, you know, if they should be relating to the work that you are planning to do in the project proposal. And ideally, yes, but we also accept that you've shown other evidence. However, we're looking for projects that are mature, that have a degree of maturity. So if they at the moment only exist in your head or on a piece of paper, you need to be sure that you can convince us that you can fulfill this within 1 year. So that's quite important. Then there was a question about funding, about the 50K and 200K. So 50K is for individuals. So if you're an individual without an organization behind you, then the maximum is 50,000 per individual. So you can be 4 individuals bidding for 50,000 each, together with 200,000 as a maximum then. Or if you are an organization, and any constellation of organizations have a maximum of 200K. So if you're in a single organization, you can bid for 200,000K. But all of that money needs to make sense in the context of the project. So there was Amelia. If you want to provide a project related to web technology, since web is built on top of the internet, is it out of scope or still relevant? These are difficult questions to answer specifically. So generally speaking, we have a number of projects that are addressing web technologies. So the answer is yes at the moment. It needs to be very specific what you're doing, and it needs to be useful for a broader community. So it needs to be a mechanism, a protocol, or something like that. I hope that answers your question, Amelia. You can unmute yourself if you would like, Amelia, and just tell me if that was okay or not. Okay, that was fine. Thank you. So we have Stefan Schwichtenberg. If we already applied for the first call but not granted, can we apply to the second as well? What are the rules for a renewed application? In which terms are they better? Does it have to be different? Claire, it's possible, right?
Yes, it's possible because they wouldn't have received funding. So yes, you can reapply. Obviously, take into account the feedback that we provided.
The feedback might be quite thin if you were removed or if you were deemed ineligible because of the scope or a minimum quality criteria. But Yeah, so the answer is yes, you can reapply. Sam? Nope, you can ask questions also in person. So if you put up your hand, maybe that's the best way.
Oh, hi, yes.
Please,
I'm sure you can hear me, so I'll just do it. I have a question about team composition. Like many of your applicants, we're a group of open source contributors who have been, brought together by our work. And we're currently applying as a small organization using my company in the Netherlands. And my question is, some of our core contributors are not based in the EU, and ideally we would like to be able to subcontract them for a non-trivial portion of the work. And I was wondering if this is in the spirit of the grant, if this is something possible, something you've seen before, and if you have any suggestions on how to sort of apply this way.
I think that's a question between me and Claire. So Claire, you need to correct me if I'm wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
So people that are living outside of the EU member states in the UK cannot receive funding from NGI Pointer or NGI in general. So there are other projects, like for instance NGI Atlantic and is it Explorers or something like this? There are some mechanisms where you can do collaboration with the US in particular. But in NGI Pointer, we don't fund individuals that are outside of the EU member states and the UK, right?
Yes, so I think what Sam was asking, right? Was it Sam? It was Sam, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so I think he was asking about subcontracting. So in essence, what's necessary for certain is that if you're the main applicant, or if you have a team of individuals, you all need to come from the eligible countries, which are stated in the Guide for Applicants. So these would be member states, associated countries, and the UK, and overseas territories, if I'm not mistaken. However, if you were subcontracting, would prefer if you had to engage companies or individuals, experts within the EU. And of course, the subcontract itself needs to be minimal, right? I think you mentioned that yourself, in fact, because you will need to demonstrate that you have the core competencies as a team and that you're able to deliver the work. So, so we would prefer if you could contract those within the EU. Mm-hmm.
Then we have, so I'm eating away on that delicious soup. So Claudio has asked a question about the relationship between milestones and payment. So if they ask to fund equipment, will payment be arranged to get the equipment soon enough to start working on, given the 12-month project? We have a very strict timeline. So the projects will be evaluated in April. There'll be contract phases. So I don't think that realistically we start working on the project before September. NGI Pointer as a project as a whole will end December 2022. So we need to be done with the individual projects October, I would say 2022 at the latest, because we need to do some reporting and certain things. So we can arrange that in your individual mentoring plan, you can purchase the equipment as you need. I mean, we're giving you, in essence, lump sums, and you just, of course, need to tell us roughly what these lump sums are used for, but that's up to you to record properly. We just need to know the breakdown. So if you have the equipment early on in the milestone context, and do that one of the first things, and, you know, we're okay with that. I think that should be fine. Claudia.
So just to step in, Mirko, as you mentioned, it's very much tied to milestone completion, right? The payment. Yeah. So in that case, what usually happens is the first milestone is paid out once you've completed a few tasks, which are quite, say, basic in a sense, because it's your attendance of the kickoff, for instance, is one of them. And so it's pretty easy to complete milestone 1, and we'll be able to transfer the money that you require for the kickoff of your technical project, right? The technical work. But we will not be able to pay you in advance of the start of the program, as Mirko mentioned. So come September, you'll be invited to the kickoff. You'll complete the first milestone within a month or even sooner, and then we'll be able to transfer the first tranche of funding to you.
Yeah, it's 15% or so of the total.
It's to be decided. Yes, yes. I guess we're quite flexible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have a question about energy efficiency and data centers. So I guess that's an example. So we're not looking for mechanisms where you are making the data center in itself more efficient in terms of air conditioning systems or cooling mechanisms, or that it's only using renewable energies and so on. That's not what we're looking for. If you have some clever way of convincing us that that's tied together with the protocol, I would be very interested to hear about it. So we're not trying to stifle any innovative, great ideas that could fit this scope. So it's very difficult to say absolutely no, but generally speaking, data centers in itself, like the structure and the utility around it, not so much. More protocols, like you write there. I hope that makes it clear as well. Can project applications be follow-up expansion to previous NGI projects? Yes. So what's very important is that NGI Pointer cannot fund follow-up projects to NGI Pointer projects that had already been funded and then would exceed the maximum of 200,000. That counts across both Open Call 1 and Open Call 2. However, if you've applied for funding under another project like NGI 0, for instance, or NGI PET or something like that, and your project will be completed by the time that you would start your new project, we're very happy to take those projects on and fund those further. And we have quite a number of projects that have graduated in that way from a smaller grant under another NGI project, and then we carried on with a much larger grant in NGI Pointer. I hope that also clarifies that part. Can you give a more detailed explanation of the type of projects you're looking for? Alberto, unfortunately, I cannot. Because we don't know really what we're looking for. We can only delimit it in certain ways, such as saying, the majority of projects that we funded so far are layer 2 and 3. Now, that doesn't mean that we're only looking for layer 2 and 3 projects. We're looking for a much broader set of projects. And but we're looking for mature projects that have workable code that contribute to the wider community. So our ideal projects are those where more people benefit than you yourself. You yourself benefiting only from this project is not a good project generally. Sorry, Alberto, it's very difficult to be more precise about this. If a project proposal in the second call is related to a funded project in the first call, but focused on a different aspect and with a completely different team, is it eligible? I would say yes. It has to be, of course, a different team. So, yeah. And Claire, you always correct me if I'm wrong, please. And Jean-Luc, you can also jump in. If there are more people who would like to ask questions verbally, then please put up your hand and we'll give you the floor.
Just going to make a comment about regarding David's question. So if he's applying from an organization that has already received funding, he'll just need to make sure that they haven't reached the maximum capacity of 200K.
That's correct. It would be different organizations, so that should be fine.
Okay.
We would like to have full transparency when it comes, to things like this. We will very strictly check double funding so that you don't get funded twice, in particular through NGI, but any other mechanisms as well for the specific work that you're doing. So if you're getting funding from other sources, but do other work under your larger project in them, please just tell us in the application. We would be very happy to hear that you also get funding from other sources to solve other problems on your ideas and work that you're doing. That's perfectly fine. I mean, Scion, NGI pointer is a small drop on the Scion project, so it makes sense to us. Stefan, I think we would really like it that you are able to explain the project within the word count that you have. You can always put links in to the text. We usually click on the links and have a look at it if we need more information. The thing about these projects that we are asking you for is it's not supposed to be difficult to apply for them. It's supposed to be very easy to apply for it. We're trying to cut as much red tape as possible, and we're making the process as easy as possible. There's still a lot of hurdles to overcome, little problems to do this and that. But there needs to be a balanced way. We can't receive, several hundreds or at least, 159 proposals, each, 100 pages long, and then do a meaningful evaluation process out of this. You put about a day, maybe day and a half into this. So we also need to evaluate it within the proportions of that, with funding making available to that as well. So it all needs to be a balanced and reasonable response overall. So I hope you can keep the explanation of the project to a good level. I know if you have a very visionary approach, often people are misunderstood, or explaining it becomes very difficult. So I hope it's possible within the word count and maybe a couple of links that you have there. Link to videos or your work that you've done already, demonstrations of what you're doing or what it's about. I think these are perfectly fine things to work with.
Just to add to that, we're not accepting multiple submissions from the same applicant.
Yeah. Okay, Alberto, flexible neural networks. I think you can catch me out on that one. I have absolutely no idea. The work program is collaboratively written by our advisory board members and Mirko and myself. I definitely did not write that part. We have one project that relates to this. Maybe I can just find that very briefly, very quickly. Then you can read about the project that we have funded under that topic or in relation to that topic. Let me just find it in my notes. No, I don't remember the name of the project. I know the number. Project number 8, Claire, if you could just look up the name of the project and how it's related to the booklet, that would be really useful.
Just give me a minute.
Yeah. You can put that in the chat. Part of the team is from a public research institute, while the others would be coming from an association. We are wondering under which umbrella we should apply to the funding, association or public research organization. That's up to you. I think either of them are fine. We have both types of constellations, and yeah, it's okay.
So I've just shared the PDF link in the chat.
And it's how do I identify now the?
Hold on a second.
I'll find it. Don't worry.
So we're looking at Universitat Politècnica de Catalunya.
Yes, ignition. Thank you, Alberto. Yeah, that's correct. So are there more questions? I think we got a very good set of questions. I think we're also getting to the hour now. You can always contact us in the official email communication that I think is the easiest. But you can also find me, of course, online. Claire, do you have any final comments?
No, not for the moment.
Jean-Luc, do you have any final comments?
Final comment, good luck to everyone.
Yes. I think we need to convince the Commission to release more funding in this topic. And I can see also that maybe in the new work program, there's already something, a placeholder in that dimension. So that's good, because I think it's a very popular call and we get a very high quality set of applications in, based on at least the first open call. So it is a very, very competitive call. We had 24 projects passing to the contract stages out of the 159 that applied. So these are the mathematical odds that you can have a look at. And we're seeing roughly the same trend happening now, don't we, Claire?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have a little bit less funding left from the overall calls. Competitiveness, we had 159 applications passing through to be eligible on the proposal side, and then we had scope and minimum quality criteria evaluated, and out of those, about half of that passed to the next stage, and then 24 were finally passing to the contract stage. And we see the same also in the trend coming now. Camilla, any comment from your side? Your recordings, so this will be made available via the NGI.eu website. So this will be on NGI.eu.
No comments. You're welcome to apply. We are looking forward to see your applications. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, and then we also had Marina in early on, but I think she's dropped out, isn't she? Yeah. So then it's good luck from my side, and I'm looking forward to seeing some really interesting proposals.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alberto. Thank you, David. Stefan, Oscar, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.